We have been doing a variety of things as a RISCA staff to celebrate this month, and we're taking our lead from our colleagues at Americans for the Arts in Washington, D.C., who have been the national organizers of National Arts and Humanities Month and have taken each day in the month and developed a theme around that day. Today's theme is why art matters. And we felt that this would be an appropriate day to gather people together to explore that particular issue. Over the past year and a half, we've been engaged in developing a strategic plan for the Arts Council. And diversity, equity, and inclusion is a central theme of that strategic plan. We felt that it would be important for us to get a sense of how some Rhode Island arts leaders are using a racial equity lens to deal with the pandemic that we're all going through. So we've gotten together a great list of speakers who can explore that issue with us. Before I turn it over to our host for today, I'd like to applaud the efforts of the RISCA staff, in particular 4 program directors, Elena Calderon-Patino, Molly Flanagan, Todd Trebor, and the person who's taken the lead on this, Maggie Anderson, in the work that they've done in organizing today's gathering. I'd also like to admit actually, that RISCA has tried to take diversity, equity, and inclusion very much at heart in everything that we do and everything that we plan and everything that we organize. The one thing that we have been exploring over the past several weeks is how best to close caption or caption these kinds of gatherings for people who need captioning. Unfortunately, we've experimented with several things that either for economic or practical reasons have not worked well for us, and we're in the search of something that would work better. We're open to suggestions from anyone offline, and hope you'll understand that today's session we were not able to close caption because we couldn't find the right package to work with. So that all said, thank you all for being with us. Janaya, you are our host today, and I'd like to turn the podium, the virtual podium, over to you.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you, everybody. Hello. Welcome to Adapting to the Pandemic with an Equity Lens. One of the first steps to real equity is acknowledging the context of our conversation today. And to that end, I invite Silvermoon LaRose to speak with the land acknowledgement. Thank you, Silvermoon.
Aswi Kwasin, Nitastui Silvermoon LaRose at English shot, Ni Nahiganset Niantic, Kanupiam, which you would Nitampawag, Ka Nitansawag, at Aki at Nahahagansik. Hello, my name is Silvermoon Mars LaRose, and that's my name in English. I am Narragansett Niantic, and I just want to welcome all of my friends and relatives here to the homelands of the Narragansett people. I want to acknowledge the journeys that brought me here today, my ancestors, those culture bearers who fight to be recognized in our homelands. And that's what allowed me to be here today in front of you, struggling to introduce myself and welcome you in a language that colonizers attempted to destroy. But I remember the words of tribal elder and historian Ellis Sekatow: as long as one Narragansett is still speaking one word, we have not lost our language. So as we gather today, I just want us to remember the indigenous people of what is now the state of Rhode Island, the Narragansett, Niantic, Pequot, the Wampanoag, Pokanoket, Nipmuc, and we can't forget that a land acknowledgement is just the first step. There's so much work that needs to be done, and we must work to uplift one another to not only recognize indigenous nations, but support their sovereignty through our actions. So Tabatni Anawayan, thank you to RISCA for this invitation. Thank you to all of you for your listening ears and open hearts. I tried to keep it fast. My mother-in-law calls people long-wind if they keep it dragging. So thank you so much today, Ninaj.
Thank you, Silvermoon. You were not long-winded, and yes, I so appreciate this. I encourage us all to consistently work to be allies through learning, decolonizing our institutions and behavior, building and sustaining relationships with Indigenous peoples, and to research, respect, and prioritize these people and this land. Thank you. So to introduce myself, I am Janaya Kizzie. I am the events coordinator at Providence Public Library and perpetual arts and culture fly on the wall / quirky neighbor. To speak to our topic today, equity in the time of COVID is the only option. 8 months ago, our lives were all very different, but we all existed within a context of oppression and inequality. In this pandemic, we must all reinvent in the face of sweeping change and the sheer inequalities that have led to the decimation in communities of color shows how much work there is still to be done. Our esteemed panel today are people speaking for and valiantly working within their communities. And the way, and we will see that the way toward equity isn't to isolate, tokenize, steal, or colonize. It's about listening, uplifting, and ceding power. On a personal note, I'm constantly salty, sorry guys. I will say that I defy the concept of an equity lens. Lenses are things that we apply and remove, and what these people are about to tell you will verify that equity has to be the foundation of our work, not the end or the way that we look at it. I'm so pleased today to be here. Thank you, RISCA. Thank you, Molly and Maggie, for inviting me. Thank you to our panelists. And I'm so pleased to introduce them. These people work in their communities. Their work has shown that equity is precisely what makes us versatile and adaptable. Today we'll be hearing from Lydia Perez of the Puerto Rican Institute for Arts and Advocacy, Jeannine Chartier of Arts Equity, Flavia Molea Baker of RIDE, and Silvermoon LaRose of the Tomaquag Museum. But not in that order. As you can see, thank you, Maggie and Molly, for sharing. Once each of them has told us a little bit about their projects and what they've been doing in the face of the pandemic, we'll have a little bit of discussion between us, and then we'll invite everybody to ask questions and discuss. And with that, I will introduce Lydia Perez of the Puerto Rican Institute for Arts and Advocacy. Thank you. We'll give everybody a moment to get settled. Lydia, we can't hear you. There we go. Try again. I think we're still having audio issues. I see the work being done and the two cameras. This is beautiful. Still no sound. A headset has been passed. Edel, if you unmute yourself, I think that would do it.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear us now?
Yes, now we can hear you. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
It's mute.
Okay,
Look at this.
no, just mommy, just talk.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah.
Are you listening to me? I'm sorry with this. This is a technical problem. So
give me the.
let me see what.
It is what it is, Lydia.
Oh,
please
my
don't
name
worry
is
about it.
Lydia Perez. I am the president of the Puerto Rican director, art director of the Puerto Rican Institute for the Art. And our project is concerned about this time of crisis now. So I would like to start this to talk about what art means to me. So, and I talk this in Spanish also because I have a lot of people to probably see this information. And I had to talk in Spanish also, and Giselle will be translate a little while because I need to everybody know what we are doing in Rhode Island. ¿Por qué es importante el arte?
Why is art so important to us?
Para contestar esa pregunta, tenemos que definir qué es arte.
To answer this question, we have to define what art is.
El arte es una necesidad humana. Se compone de emociones e intelecto para crear una producción de una obra. El arte tiene estética e intelecto. El arte tiene estética y rubros diferentes como la pintura, la instrumentación, los grabados, cine, teatro, cocina, artesanía, bla, 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 danza, instrumentación. Estas 5 que yo voy a decir ahora son parte de lo que nosotros hacemos.
In our opinion, art is a human need. It is made up of emotions and intellect for the creation and production of artwork. It means humanity. It's what makes us human. Art has aesthetics in different areas, such as in painting, photography, sculpture, engraving, cinema, theater, cooking, crafts, poetry, songs, and instrumentation and dancing. These last 5 are what we have been doing for the last 40 years.
Ha sido música, danza, teatro y baile y cantos.
Sí.
So, lo que hemos logrado a través del arte durante 26 años en Rhode Island es llevar a la comunidad y a los distritos escolares de Rhode Island, Boston, Springfield, Connecticut, nuestras artes tradicionales.
Oh, next slide. Okay, yes, these last 5 is what we have been doing for the last 40 years. Art is part of an evolution that goes from generation to generation, depending on how long. For the past 26 years, we have been bringing this art out to the community and to school districts in Rhode Island, in Boston, Springfield, Connecticut, to these children.
Yeah. And then, este año, por medio de la pandemia 19, todos los artistas tienen que estar involucrados. All artists need to be involved in this pandemic 19. Para nosotros, los niños, jóvenes y adultos, que tengan una base de su identidad. Eso es lo que nosotros hacemos. Que los niños estén identificados con su propia historia, la historia de la humanidad, la historia de ellos, de la familia. Eso es necesario para poder crear arte. Eso es humanidad.
So we've been bringing this art, this traditional art, out to the children within children, youths, and adults on a basis of creating and identifying their selves, their identity, and how it can also evolve over time. This knowledge has been transferred, throughout mankind. This year, with the pandemic, all artists have a need to evolve, think outside of their box. This is something unexpected, which took us all by surprise and makes us think about creating new ways to continue our journey into the communities that today have so many restrictions imposed. In this time of crisis, technology has been fundamental basis of being able to ensure that our creativity does not diminish and does not fall behind.
Esto es bien importante porque la tecnología ha sido una base fundamental en este cambio con esta crisis actualmente que estamos pasando. Nosotros, como ustedes saben, nos transmitimos a través del tambor, de nuestra música, de nuestros ancestros y I can't say that in English, it also in Spanish. Trascendemos a través de las artes, a través del tambor, como nuestros indios y como nuestros africanos lo hacían. Comunicación a través del tambor.
Yes.
Es comunicación detrás del tambor.
Today we
Translated.
¿Qué tú dijiste? I'm sorry.
Oh my God. Estamos hablando de que nosotros nos comunicamos a través del tambor.
Yes. Traditionally, we communicate through the use of instruments, of drums, just like our ancestors have, both the Taino Indians and of the African descendancies. And we strive to keep that tradition alive through our music and through our cultural teachings.
La técnica que siempre hemos utilizado son los instrumentos musicales, como son el tambor, la pandereta en estos momentos, porque estamos realizando en estos momentos un grupo de mujeres tocando plena.
We use mainly our hand drums because they're more useful and easier to travel with. And currently we have brought these teachings into the schools, into the classrooms, and we also have established a cultural group made up of women pleneras, or people who play plena, which is our traditional instrument.
So, en la tradición para nosotros es igual que conectarse cuerpo a cuerpo, face to face, y nosotros lo hacemos a través de las panderetas y de los tambores.
The way we use to translate information is through music, through drums, through plena, which is specifically a sung newspaper, or bomba, which is a expression of yourself, your being, through dance and body movement and communicating what it is that you wish to say.
También hemos activado lo que es el aprendizaje. Estamos enseñándole a los líderes puertorriqueños comunicarse a través de la pandereta.
We are also, this year, we have also activated an apprenticeship program, which we are using to train other future Puerto Rican leaders so that they can also continue on these traditions, branching out.
Y por medio de la tecnología nos hemos activado en videos instruccionales. Esto en el caso de Heart for Perform, nuestro programa Caribbean Art está dentro de los currículos escolares de estudios sociales, arte y música.
Yes. Because, no, go back. Okay, because of the restrictions of COVID and the pandemic today, we have also had to evolve using technology. We've been part of Hartford Performs for a few years. We've been bringing these lessons directly into the classrooms to the children. And this year, since we couldn't, they have asked us to submit video format, so that they can have a library of short lessons that the teachers can access on a database, and where usually we would come into the classrooms live. Now we can go into the classrooms virtually with these videos.
Para sentir el amor de nuestro pueblo puertorriqueño en Rhode Island. Para sentir el amor del pueblo puertorriqueño en Rhode Island.
To share the love of our fellow Puerto Ricans in Rhode Island.
Nosotros hemos creado y porque vienen las Navidades, hemos activado a nuestras líderes puertorriqueñas para hacer parrandas. ¿Qué es parranda?
Next slide.
Next slide.
Okay, so yes, to spread our cultural love among our fellow Puerto Ricans, we have, like I said, activated, and Latinos, we have activated an apprenticeship program to teach plena to these leaders, these women leaders in the Puerto Rican community, and just in time for Christmas and our tradition of parranda, which is our version of Christmas caroling.
Las pleneras de Rhode Island es el proyecto que está llevando el mensaje de solidaridad, amor a nuestra patria, respeto a nuestro pueblo puertorriqueño.
This is our little pet project that we have been establishing for a couple of months, and it's a project in solidarity, patriotic love, and respect for our Puerto Rican community and our Latino, a gift to our Latino friends, and of course our not Spanish speaking friends also.
So, para nosotros ha sido un placer realmente el poder hacer esta actividad, este programa por medio de Expansion Art Program. Si puedes ponerlo.
Before you put on the videos to show what we've, the examples, we'd like to give thanks to the Expansion Art, RISCA, Rhode Island Foundation, Council for the Humanities, and all of you guys.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you put it the other side?
You can put, the first link is little tidbits and examples of how we have been teaching these leaders little by bit every Saturday. They've been coming over privately to our house, you know, with masks, and we've been teaching them so that they can teach others.
Okay. ¿Se puede poner?
Mm-hmm. They have to press play. Oh, can you guys hear that?
Okay, parece que no se escucha. No se escucha.
Wait.
Oh, I can hear you. No?
Can you hear that?
Can you hear?
No.
No, we can't hear the sound.
No.
Okay, that's okay.
No.
But this is a practice that we did on day by day to make possible the Plenera de Rhode Island 2020. So if you see one of them is the president of PRADI, Puerto Rican Professional Association of Rhode Island. They are all member of that organization, and we collaborate in this program to share our music, and then doing what they had to do. So this is what we are doing, teach the people. So if you want to go to the other slide, okay. And the other one, this is better, the last, el otro. Okay, if you see, this is my apprentice, the apprentice, the name is Grisel Lopez. She is the treasurer of the Puerto Rican Professional Association. And then all of them have a certificate from the Puerto Rican Institute for the Art for good and outstanding performance.
For the accomplishment and the completion of the apprenticeship program.
Another thing is that we podemos
another thing is that for those interested, and specifically also for these ladies, we have procured directly from Puerto Rico, specifically handmade plena drums from master artisans, and that we can also provide these services for others who are interested.
And then this is part of our economy, you know.
It helps bolster our friends in Puerto Rico, the artisans, and help them through COVID by providing them a source of income.
And the other side of the picture, we have a parranda, and we did a parranda to our friend, Puerto Rican friend. She has a Center of Innovación de la Mujer Latina.
The Center for the Latino Innovation for Women.
And that was our first parranda.
And that was our first parranda, or the first performance.
So me gustaría pues que cuando tuvieran tiempo, when you have a time, you can go to our website and you can see everything that we done and we did already. So thank you so much, Expansion, RISCA, Rhode Island Foundation, all of you. And this is what we are doing in our pandemic crisis. Yes, it's a crisis. Thank you so much. I'm gonna translate it.
Sorry, we were a little flustered.
It's the first time.
Thank you both.
First time that you translate it like that. Thank you so much. And this is what I do. Si te creía que yo no venía, si te creías que yo no
in case you couldn't hear it through the YouTube.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lydia. Thank you, Idel. So we so appreciate it. That was amazing.
All right.
All right. And next on our list, I'm happy to introduce Flavia Molea Baker.
Hello, everyone.
Right.
My name is, my name is Flavia Molea Baker. I'm the Multilingual Learners Program Coordinator at RISE. And I think that Janaya and Silvermoon already said eloquently, the COVID crisis has raised many of the inequities that were under the surface, and now they're becoming more and more evident. And finally, we are in a stage where it's impossible not to see what is happening. And in the world of education, what this brought up is the obvious realization that we need to teach our students more, and we also need to bring with them, to them, digital literacy to them as students, but also to their families. Without technology, we are a little bit out of the world. Without a reliable internet connection, we are completely off. Needless to say, we are a little bit, well, we are definitely distanced from receiving high quality education. So next slide. What has happened with the COVID crisis is that we have been losing bits of communication, and we haven't had so many in-person meetings. When we are on Zoom meetings, sometimes we have the camera on, sometimes we don't. So we are missing facial expressions. And even now I'm at the office, I have my mask on, so my expressions are a little bit lost behind this mask. But what this brings up is the idea that our communication is shifting a little bit, and our writing and spoken languages are absorbing what the nonverbal communication would be used to communicate among us. So it is important to be very cognizant about the asset view of the language that we are using and using the right terminology. We hear a lot about learning loss, remediation, and achievement gap, but we could be thinking about those negative connotation of language and what that means into a more positive and way that is actually bringing more to what we are doing and we are thinking. So we would like to think more, we should be thinking more about accelerating the learning, about enriching learning, about supplementing learning. So making sure that our students have what they need and the major necessities, but what they really truly need is also high quality education that reaches everyone and not just a few. So next slide. more than ever, there are three main words that I'd like you to focus on today. One is multilingual, the other is multicultural, and the third one is multimodal. Multilingual, we understand now how much it is helpful to know more than one language, and how that is allowing us with technology to branch in other worlds. Multicultural, we bring with ourselves funds of knowledge, and a lot of what we already know is enriching our experience in a new culture. And multimodal, it is important that, like in arts, that we are expressing idea concepts in different ways. It's important that we allow our students to have access to this multimodal world. So next slide. The multilingual, we tend to talk about very often with multilingual learners about just translation, as if just translating, we would build in also what a teacher does with actually scaffolding, modeling, and showing students how things are done. Translating per se is not the only thing that is needed. It's important and it's very helpful, but it's not the only tool or the only idea that we should focus on. And to this point, what I would like to say is that the COVID pandemic, like it was on the first slide, has been showing to us that our communities are more important, that without that support that we have with the family and a strong community partnership, we are losing a lot of what we are and what we can do. So talking points is one tool that I would suggest anyone to use when working with multilingual learners. It's an app that was created by a nonprofit organization. And the idea is that just having a phone number and a contact number of parents, adults, or caregivers, you are able to communicate through languages. So that the idea of making sure that there is a communication that is two-way communication, that you're communicating to someone who speaks another language, but that person also has the opportunity and the access to a free tool that allows them to use their own language and their own expression and linguistic repertoire to then communicate with you. The second word, so you can go to the next slide, thank you. It's multicultural. So I touched a little bit on this before, but what is funds of knowledge? So the idea is that with us, we bring an asset of value and an asset of knowledge that is both academical and personal background knowledge. We have experience through our lives that are building who we are, building our identity, and are giving us pieces of knowledge that are built on experience. And then we also have a lot of knowledge and skills that are built by what we are experiencing in the day-to-day world and the social context. And finally, another very important thing is that multilingual learners, either if you have always been here in the US or you have been coming to the US, you experience a different worldview. And so just like Lydia was presenting, she's bringing to the US the Puerto Rican life and culture and the importance of how art is making the connection with the identity that is being Puerto Rican, but also of coming here to the US and living here with other Puerto Ricans and other citizens, or I shouldn't say citizen, you don't have to be a citizen, human beings. Yeah.
You're Costa Rican?
No, I'm from Italy. I'm from Rome.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
And so I think that our multilingual students live in one or multiple cultures, and with them, they bring a lot of knowledge. And so to the left, all these areas are areas in which there is more that our students know, and more we should ask them for feedback, for information, and we need to be listening to them. There's a lot in the world experience that they bring in that once they enter the classroom it's most of the time left at the door. Instead, their identities should come in with them, and they should be able to express and communicate and message and build their language through experience. And this is what fundus of knowledge is. So how your multicultural knowledge and what you know is a bridge for you to learn more and to share with others. And this is what builds our identity. And we want our students to bring rich identity with them and not hide it, but leverage it and value it in the classroom and everywhere. And then the final word, multimodal. Next slide. So this is another concept that in art, it's easy to express how art is multimodal. You can have photography, you can have sculpture, you can have painting. So each of them is a different mode with which the artist is expressing ideas and concepts. And very often what the artist does is expressing they're going against what is said as being the norm. And so artists very deliberately make the action to say with their art what is not going well, what is wrong, what needs to be changed. And so when we're looking at communication, we're looking at education, and we're looking at working with students and what they bring with them to the classroom, we cannot rely just on reading and writing. We need to make sure that they are able to use all their assets and their ways of communicating, because the end result will be that they will still use critical thinking. They will still be working towards a concept, but they will do it in a way that is for them inspiring, and therefore it's going to lend to better results. So here I have misorganized text of a story to the left, which just looking by it is not very appealing. And it's, I mean, not to me at least. Oh, I love art. And I prefer the second one where that a story is illustrated. There are words, there are terms that are specific to the literature and to the language. And then we see the visuals. And then at the center, at the bottom, we can go through a story just by identifying the characters and looking at the characters, who they are and what they bring to the story. And then at the end, that same story can be watched as a movie. So when we are watching it as a movie, there is much more richness. There is the music, there is the ambience, there's the visual, there's the listening, there's the reading. And so I think that what we need to bring to our students, instead of set ways of learning through reading and writing, we need to bring that richness of multimodal, the richness that art has and has always been using. And that's the richness of art, because it's a universal language. Anywhere art can be expressed without needing to speak that same language. For example, you don't have to speak English to understand a painting or to start talking about a painting. And so this is what I would like you to consider more as we are working with our students, because multilingual students interpret ideas and access information and concepts through various sources. So if we limit them only to reading a textbook or just listening to the teacher without that creative process, they are not going to learn. And the more and more our students are finally reaching out and showing their diversity and being proud of it and their identity, the more and more teachers should allow them to be who they are and express themselves as they prefer. And finally, I would like to conclude that we shouldn't really talk about the kids' home language, but what we should be talking about is what languages are they loved in? So, because that is the language of love that they will build their identity, their knowledge, and will be the step and the access for learning more and sharing with others and learning from others. And thank you, everyone. And thank you, RISCA, for organizing this event.
Thank you so much, Flavia. That was amazing, and I hadn't thought of multimodality in that way. I really appreciate that. All right. Oh, I wanted to remind everybody to take a look at the chat because there have been some links and some comments that may be of use to all of you. And next up is Silvermoon LaRose from the Tomaquag Museum. Thank you, Silvermoon.
I'm sharing my link now, so I don't forget. The link I'm sharing is to the Tomaquag Museum because a lot of what I'll share with you today, that's the place that you'll want to go if you're interested in any of these things and want to check it out further. If we can go to the next slide. My presentation is very visual. I just want you to see so that you can look at other things besides me running my lips. The pictures here in this slide is representative of actually a project grant that I received through RISCA, Projects in Education, to do a pilot program at Chartier High School around bringing in Indigenous arts to the students. We were meeting after school. This started in January of this year. And I came in to meet with students and teach them different traditional arts. So we would talk about the type of Native art, where it originated from, variations across cultures, and we would be able to create that art form. And really, it was all about teaching the kids to make that art their own. So everybody learned the skills, but then the goal was to make something that was totally representative of them. And the idea of the program was to bring Indigenous artists into the school. So it wasn't just me teaching, I also was bringing in other traditional artists as educators. In the top, I'm bad with right and left, right screen, the lady sitting down, she's teaching the students to bead. Her name is Mishki Thompson, and she also received a grant from RISCA to do beading classes. So we kind of paired up and brought her into the school to teach a beading class. She is Narragansett. She's also disabled, so she's been making her living off of her traditional art form. So this was one of the ways that we look to empower other Native artists. And she was able to come into and share. In the bottom left screen is cultural educator and Donna Spears, and she came in to speak to the students about how art can transfer your voice, speaking around issues of social justice, identity, and how you can use your Indigenous voice through art to share your story. The ultimate goal of this program was for these students to create an exhibit that could then travel and be seen at different schools, with the idea that other students will see it, they'll get to know about Indigenous visibility, that we are still here, and these are the voices of Native people within their community. And we had lined up different schools that were interested in having it on display, including the Providence Children's Museum. So I was very excited about this program. And then COVID happened and everything changed. We were doing so good up until March, and then the schools just shut down and we were no longer able to come into the schools. Everything was put on hold. And for the longest time, everybody knows, we didn't know what was going on, when we would be able to return. So this whole project has just been on hold since then. And just now, with the craziness at the schools, the educators have not really had time to discuss bringing back these programs, how we're going to do it, if we can come back and do it, in what way. So it's a little disconcerting trying to figure out how to bring these things back, because a lot of these art forms are things that you really need that hands-on assistance. So it doesn't necessarily translate to doing something virtually. I didn't talk about the bottom right corner. One of the things of this project is, as we were teaching these older students in the high school how to do these traditional arts, they were then going with me to the elementary school at Charlestown to help with a flash program they had there. So they were learning the art form, then they were coming to the elementary school to teach the kids there to do the art form. And that way transferring that knowledge and teaching them to be teachers as well. If we can go to the next screen. The reason I did that program and designed it in that way is because of the work that I do at Tomaquag Museum as the assistant director. So at Tomaquag, we wear many hats. We wear all the hats. And one of my hats there is to be an educator, a cultural educator. So I do teaching programs as well at the school, including our Children's Hour program. We have a Children's Hour once a week throughout the summertime, where we do, we bring children in, it's free to the public, and we can do traditional teaching. My area of, I won't say expertise, I don't believe we ever become experts. There's always more to learn, but what I like to teach most about is traditional use of indigenous plants. So we do a lot of that education at the museum. In the picture in the top left, this is Donna Spears, our director, who's doing a program at the State House. They were doing those field trips there. And her part in those field trips was to teach about the indigenous people of Rhode Island. And this is a group of students that she was leading in a traditional dance. In the bottom left corner, that's an art class. We bring in Native artists from the community to teach traditional arts. Sometimes it's just for Native community members, other times it's open to the public. It depends on the art form. There's some things that we think are important to keep within our communities to avoid cultural appropriation, but there's other things that we want to share so that others can learn from that experience. So we do a little of both. This was particularly a community program with all Native people. We were teaching traditional quill work, and Yolanda Smith, who is a fantastic traditional artist. She's Seekonk Wampanoag and Narragansett. She was the instructor that day. And so through that program, we can also empower other Native artists by finding work for them, paying for them to be teachers. I believe this particular program was partially funded by RISCA. So thank you to RISCA for that. In the top right, we have a presenter from Ibex Theater. It's the daughter of Jim Henson, who started this, this group, and they do puppetry teaching by Indigenous teachers and others in their crew. They have this awesome puppet show called Ajijak, and it teaches about the migration of the crane. And through that migration, you're visiting all different Native communities in their way of life through the season. So it's a really great program. We were able to have them at Tomaquag Museum to do that play, a version of that play for the public. It was fantastic. So lots of hands-on, lots of people coming. Bottom left corner is a book talk. We had an author, the family of Crazy Horse, who came and presented that literature and the history behind Crazy Horse and in his family line and their history there. So all of our program was very interactive. It was bringing people into the museum. It was hands-on learning. And then COVID happened and everything changed. If we can go to the next screen. This is how we have been trying to reinvent ourselves as an organization and everything that we have done. Our Children's Hour had to go from being in-person, hands-on to being virtual. And we started using the tools, and none of us are tech savvy. We are all struggling. So I always say, you know, don't look at how we did it, look at the content. Because when we first started, it was just figuring out how to do this. How do you give a presentation online? We wanted to do, during the summer, we were reading books, children's books by Native authors. So how do you show a book well on a screen? And so we had to learn how to use Zoom and do a presentation like this, where we could show the pages of the book and then be able to also include a lesson. So in that top left-hand corner, that's me and my son who were doing a lesson on a story we had read during that Children's Hour program, and trying to figure out how to use these tools and using them, Zoom, using YouTube, which is where all these are posted. In the top right corner is Lindsay Montanari, our educator. She's Narragansett Niantic, and she has different skills. Thank God for young people who know how to do stuff that we will never know how to do. But she's been able to take her Children's Hour and she's telling traditional stories, and she started to animate them. So right underneath her, that picture is a little cranberry animation where she was telling the traditional story of where cranberries came from. And she animated it just by drawing some pictures and having them flash through the screen. So really creative. If you haven't checked out our Children's Hour, they're available on our YouTube, Tomaquag Museum on YouTube. I don't know. There's links from our website. I know it's called Tomaquag Museum, but I don't know links and stuff. But it has the Children's Hours there. You can go and check them out. And really, she makes these from her cell phone. So it's possible to use the tools that we have available to us to kind of create these things and just figuring it out as we go. In the bottom left corner, we are doing a series called Quarantine Creatives, which we do interviews with Native artists and we give them a chance to share their story. The idea behind this is Native artists will be able to present themselves and their work to the community. You can learn more about the art form, you can learn more about the artists and their work and what they're doing and ways to support them. Because right now, artists all over are struggling, but it's been really bad in Native country because a lot of what we do is seasonal anyway. During the summer when we have traditional events, powwows, art shows, and all of that got canceled. And so a lot of people who made their living off of that, it's now not happening. So what do you do instead? How do you get your name out there? How do you get your work out there for let people know it's available for sale? So our way of trying to empower the Native community was to do this project and give them a chance to share their voice, share their art in ways that you can support. And it's been very exciting. We're also recording these and then putting them on our YouTube page so that they're there forever and you can go and check them out. I really recommend checking them out. They've been fantastic. Every artist is different and unique, and their artwork speaks so much to the variations of Native art. And the last one we just did with Nayana Lafon was so powerful. She talked a lot about her paintings that are dedicated to missing and murdered Indigenous women and talking about that issue in our communities. So there's definitely a civic lens through this, and thanks to funding, we're able to continue these programs. So please check them out. We have another one coming up, 2 more coming up, one next month and one in December. And we've also had to make our store, our museum store, go virtual. In the bottom right corner, this is just a quick bad screenshot I took of our website. But on our Tomaquag Museum website, there is a button to shop and you can go to the museum store online, and we have an intern who is uploading new product every day. Our store is what do they call that? Not a collaboration, but a, I don't know, one of those C words. And
Co-op.
Thank you. It's like a co-op. So we have over 30 different Native artists who sell their work through our museum store. They're able to set their own prices. The museum takes 20%, the artist gets 80%. And because they get to set their own price, they make sure they get what they need. So it supports the museum, but it also goes directly to supporting that artist. So we have been uploading all of the things in our store little by little. We're getting it all up there into the online store so that you can shop from real Indigenous artists in your community and support them. And this has been big for us because a lot of these artists were only selling during the summer at powwows, and now they have a venue for all year round to be able to continue to sell their work and get paid. And there's new things all the time because they can give us whatever, and artists are creative, so they're always creating new things. So definitely check out that website. And share it with others because you're helping to get Native voice out there through their work. So these are just some of the ways that we've been trying to change up what we do and how we do it. We're using YouTube, we're using social media, we're putting everything that we can online. We created a whole new, on our website, you'll see virtual programs, and we do lectures, and we do, we've even been figuring out how to do art classes virtually. And are there some art forms we can teach that don't need to be so hands-on, that you can watch from home and do? And we've done a couple, and we're trying to figure out how to do more, but we make little packets of all the things you need and we send them in advance so that you have all your materials, and then we're leading them online. We also have a virtual book talk that we're doing just to keep engaging the public. We're focusing on Indigenous science fiction books. And that's been really fun, just to dissect these books and tear them apart. It gives you something to do in the evenings. It's every Tuesday night. You're welcome to join and be a part of the conversation, even if you haven't read the books, because a lot of what we're talking about, it's just community commentary. So I'm gonna stop now because here come the kids. So if you have questions for later.
Silvermoon, thank you so much. Before you mute, there was a question in the chat about the museum. Is the museum open? Is it possible to visit?
Yeah, it is still open, but because of COVID, we had to change how we do things. So instead of just being able to come certain days a week, we are now doing visits by appointment only. So if you want to visit the museum, it's best to call. People send emails, but I usually write them back and say call because it's faster that way. And we schedule a day for you to come and visit. We did have to change our pricing in order to kind of support that, because now instead of people just being able to come and you on specific days, we have to have educators come in and be available for that. So the price has changed. It's $10 a person. We ask a minimum of $50 because we're opening up just for use, but you can bring 5 people for that, and $10 for each additional person. We max out at 15 people. We're keeping it just private, your group, so you're not mixing with other groups and other people, just to keep down contact. We are a small museum, it's one room, so small enclosed space, we gotta be careful. But we are still open, and our store is still open. So if people just call and say, I wanna come in and stop by the store, you can come in and do your shopping if you would rather do that than shop online. So definitely still come and see us.
Thank you so much, Silvermoon.
Thank you.
That was great.
Yeah, excellent. All right, and now next we have Jeannine Chartier, excuse me, from Arts Equity.
Thanks. Molly, is it possible to get rid of these pictures on the right side so that on my future slides, we can see the whole slide? At the moment, I have a whole bunch of faces on top of everything that you're showing.
There should be a little line to the left that will allow you to minimize it.
That's something that is on your end and not my end, I believe.
So
I-
yeah.
Okay, sorry. What do I do? Exit full screen?
No, at the
So
top.
Jeannine,
Okay, thank you, I got it.
Jan-
Thank you.
oh, good.
I know, it's, as you know, as others have said before, it's all a struggle. It is just not anything that we were prepared for when March came. We just came to a crashing halt, and yeah, and it was really difficult. So VSA Arts turned into Arts Equity, and we do arts education and advocacy programming for children, youth, and adults with disabilities. And I have some talking points with me so that I can keep my COVID brain a bit on track. But because disability naturally overlaps and intersects with race and ethnicity, gender, class, caste, sexuality, and other communities, including places that are visible or invisible, physical or psychological, we tend to look at our work and look at equity through a intersectional lens. And that's both for art expression and for social justice, as of course we believe that art does inspire social change. So I'm going to share a couple of things about where I think we all intersect moving forward in this new way of doing things new, better, and intersectional. So regarding an equity lens and allies, the disability rights movement was really based on the civil rights movement. Both demanded improved access. They tightly informed each other. And so, like I said, I'm going to explore a little how the pandemic, which brings a lot of problems for those of us with disabilities because we have comorbid problems and complications from long-term illnesses. And so how the pandemic plays in along with the current Black Lives Matter movement has us all really thinking a lot more deeply about how we can be ethically engaged with one another. And so Molly, if you can go to my first slide. One great role model in the civil rights and disability rights movement has been this person who's on the top left, Brad Lomax. Brad was a member of the Black Panthers, and also, as you can see, he was a wheelchair user. And he realized early on that parallel to racism is ableism, and that they both arise from the same source of oppression. And so he really used that to help advance both movements that happened in the 70s, sorry, out in Berkeley and California. And he really was instrumental in getting the Black Panthers to work together with the disability community to support protests that were going on that really were 504 and got us our first kind of batch of disability rights. And so racism and ableism. Ableism is a system that places value on people's bodies and minds based on society's constructs of what it is considered to be normal, and of course, who has the power to decide who gets to be normal. So for both of us, these constructed ideas are really deeply rooted in anti-Blackness and differences, things like eugenics, colonialism, capitalism, and reflecting back on Silvermoons with the colonialism, frankly, the indigenous people were the only culture that we know of that did not have a category of disability or a way of segregating people with disabilities. They were all just considered together on a spectrum of what we all had ability to do. That very much came over into this country with the colonists. So in racism and ableism, as well as sexism and all of those other areas, systematic oppression leads to these dominant power structures of people and society deciding who's valuable. A lot of that is based on appearance. So again, that overlap in between the appearance of people of color, identifying them as maybe not worthy is the same or similar to the appearance of those of us that have physical disabilities, and society telling us that we also are not as worthy as the normal structure that's in place. And so I brought my little placard out of my car. While those parking placards might imply that disability is primarily about wheelchairs, disability is really not that kind of a binary medical monolithic feature, but especially has evolved over time as more about social justice. So for example, if you all go downtown to the State House, you all get to walk in the front door, which is up a series of steps, and go through a door and then go up another series of steps before you get into a place where justice will take place. I get to come in through the basement, through a back door with the custodians in order to access those same hallways of power. So clearly we can see that things have been set up for us in a very unequal measure. So again, in the lower right-hand corner is Kimberly Crenshaw. And because of my lived experience as a disabled queer female, a gender feminist, and I have a physical disability due to having polio as a child, so I can't tell you the level of things that having a contagious virus running around in the community sort of hits me on a PTSD level. But we were all incredibly grateful in 1991 when Kimberly published her Mapping the Margins articles, because that's what coined the word intersectionality. And we had been looking for how to describe that for a long time. And it ties into also the earlier things that Flavia said about multimodal and multicultural. And interestingly, only a year separates when Kimberly coined the term intersectionality and when the ADA was passed. One was in 1990, one was in 1991. And both of those things really served to help define pivotal moments in our oppressive structures, in our struggles that impact our lives. And I want to talk just briefly to tell you about intersectionality, if you don't know it or aren't quite familiar with it, because it operates both as an observance and an analysis of power imbalances. Again, who has the power and who's going to tell who is normal or not normal. But it can also act as a tool that we can use to eliminate those imbalances. So in that idea of, you know, the multicultural and telling stories through different methodologies, stronger together. So two other role models for us that, in case you don't know, I wanted to just bring to your attention is, of course, Audre Lorde, that's her. And I think you can probably read Kimberly's Crenshaw thing before I go on, but she basically says that this idea that we all have the same life is false. Race, class, gender come together to shape the life chances of people in various different ways. And Audre said there is no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. There's all elements of us that intersect. Another role model we have is Gloria Anzaldúa, and she's in the lower left-hand corner. Also, Audre, a lot of people don't know this, but Audre was legally blind. And so she had a lot of communication issues as a child, which was how she got led into communicating via the written word and poetry, because speaking those words gave her an opportunity to communicate in ways that she could not necessarily do through reading and writing. And when in 1984, she wrote the Cancer Journals, she had to talk about a lot of issues of having to do with body and how body affects our social justice and changes the way we think about things. And so she wrote, when she was chronicling her body, either I love my body one-breasted now, or I remain forever alien to myself. And that alien thing is picked up again by Gloria. Gloria wrote some really transformational works, Borderlines, La Frontera, in 1987. She is a Chicana lesbian feminist poet and fiction writer, although she totally rejected identity labels. She had long-term illnesses. She had chronic pain due to severe hormonal imbalances, some of which was caused by diabetes. She died in 2004 with diabetes-related complications. But in writing about her disabling condition, she wrote, I felt I had been turned into an alien. So I think it's really interesting that you have these two women who are coming out with groundbreaking works about intersectionality, about how culture and then becoming physically disabled turns our lives around, and really talk about how that puts us in a place of where society has made us feel like, frankly, we are aliens. So in thinking about and adapting to the pandemic and the political climate and all of this intersectionality kind of stuff, I think that one good thing that really might come out of this god-awful year is that we might have a chance to dramatically reset our way of doing things. And one of the opportunities we have now in looking ahead is about looking more into where we intersect and intersectionality, and how that can inform the work that we can all do. And especially now through, of course, technology. Here we are all Zooming, and I love everything that Tomaquag is doing online, and I so appreciate the struggle, because we all work together over the summer at a lot of festivals where we get to work hands-on with a lot of people, and it's been difficult not having that connection with people. So being put into Zooming is something that we're all struggling to get used to. If you want to go to the next slide, I'll talk about a couple of programs that we're doing. One that's not here, however, is the Allen Ginsburg Poetry Competition. And we've been doing that for 30 years in a very hands-on, personal way. But right now, we're working on converting it to be an online activity. So this is primarily for adults that have intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we provide a theme for them to write works on, and then they send the works back. Usually we have a big ceremony where everybody comes together and reads all of their works and gets to network and socialize. And of course, right now, we can't do that. And as I mentioned, a lot of our folks are really immunocompromised, and so are very much stuck at a place of being in their group homes or potentially with families. And so it's been a really difficult kind of thing. It's taken us quite a while. Usually we have the Allen Ginsburg poetry thing in the spring, and here we are already in the fall, still trying to pull it together. But we have artists sending us in photos and videos of themselves speaking their poems. And so we will put together a presentation that will be as accessible as we can make it, and send packages out to all of the places, packages of people who have awarded medals and of the prizes and things they get. So in their individual group homes, while we're all Zooming, everybody will still be able to receive their awards and share their work. One thing that's pretty amazing about Zooming, good and bad, is that so now we don't have to worry about whether or not we can physically access any place. Can we physically get in the door? Can we physically use the bathroom? None of that has to be our concern, but you know, technology, as Randy mentioned earlier, it's been a hard thing for folks to get to. I participate in a lot of national and international events, and I have to tell you, they are all open captioned for people who have hearing problems. when people come on in the beginning and normally do, their pronouns and other kinds of things, we also do a visual interpretation. And so also not just for people who have low vision or are blind, but a lot of people are having internet problems. So they don't have a camera and they don't have a visual to go through. So for example, I would say something like, I'm a Caucasian woman from French and Irish descent. I'm wearing a white shirt, black frame glasses. I have blonde and auburn hair, but it's rapidly turning gray in this period of quarantine. So each person would share who they are and what that looks like to be able to bridge that into not just captioning for the deaf, but also for people who have, like I said, who have blind and low vision. And also a number of people have talked about YouTube and other places, and I haven't done it in a while, but it used to be incredibly easy to add captions to anything on YouTube. There was just a little button that you would hit. And so before people put up their things permanently out there in streaming world, I would really ask you to spend a little time to see about how you can build in some of those accessibility features, and then also advertise that you've built into those accessibility features. Because being live streaming and being on the web, we've been able to, like I said, we don't have to get in cars and physically travel to some place. I'm working with a group in Texas, and once upon a time, we brought a theater company down there and had to fly and bus and bring everything down. Now they're doing a open night mic couple of times a month. So what we're going to be able to do is not appear in their space, but appear virtually. So I'm going to be able to take all of these videos that my artists have done and poems that they have written about the pandemic and send them down, so that then we will be able to still participate in international programs and things that are taking place across the world without being worried about physically getting there. So these pictures that you're actually looking at is from another way in which we've pivoted to the COVID pandemic. This is called Windows on Pawtucket, and it's a visual art exhibit that's taking place throughout downtown in empty storefronts. And more stores, unfortunately, are closing again due to pandemic. So it's a way to sort of keep the community and the neighborhood lively and not just have all of these abandoned and empty places that are out in our communities. So Arts Equity, our home office is in Pawtucket, and we've always done exhibits in unconventional spaces. A few years ago, we worked with the Pawtucket Mayor's Advisory Commission to help turn a whole section of their city hall into a gallery space. And often I find for us, first of all, a lot of gallery spaces are not physically accessible, so that sort of limits. But also when you put things in unconventional spaces, you really get to reach out to populations who necessarily wouldn't go to a gallery for an opening. So by having things in places like City Hall and at the RISCA building downstairs in the atrium, you really get to have your artwork reach a whole bunch of folks that are, for example, going to RISCA to pay their taxes, would never necessarily intersect with art. But it's amazing, the people that see it and then the comments that you get back for it. So we have put this up in what used to be the Pawtucket Times space downtown. And again, trying to talk about how those of us with disabilities really do intersect across immigrant and indigenous and Black and brown and LGBTQIA. We tried to put together something that would represent that diversity. So we were initially started by a Kennedy, Ambassador Jean Kennedy Smith. So we reference the Kennedys a lot. So their work that we would go by is, if art is to nourish the roots of our culture, society must set the artist free to follow his vision wherever it takes him. And we encourage all our artists, as it sounds like everybody else in your communities, excuse me, try and set them free to to follow their vision. So sometimes it's about the ethnicity culture that they're in. Sometimes it's about their disability. Sometimes it's about, you know, my boyfriend Jack's the best guy in the world. And also, again, because of the parallels in between the disability rights movement and the civil rights movement, we also reference a lot of civil rights things. In this particular case, Martin Luther King, and justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So, as I said, in thinking about pandemic and COVID and pivoting, how do we rebuild? You know, we have to look at how racism, sexism, and ableism is experienced in our communities, in our policymaking, in our social systems. And we hopefully look internally at the work that we are doing, but hopefully also through events like this, we can become part of a community that can talk about all of those multicultural ways that we intersect. And I hope we don't go back to business as usual. I hope that this can be sort of a new boundary that we can all leap over together. If a lot of you have not thought about accessibility before, you're likely going to have to in the future. Today, over 26% of the population has disabilities, and according to the CDC, that number is only going to grow larger. So not only are we the minority that you don't have to be born into, if any of you live long enough, either through an accident or illness or even simply aging, you will become part of my community and the community that Art Equity addresses. And like I said, we don't even know what kind of problems are going to result out of people having COVID, but long-term things. So as Randy said, sadly, Rhode Island is behind on a lot of this work. There are several organizations that do surveys in spring and fall about great places to live or not live if you have a disability. And Providence, Rhode Island is about 176 on a tour of 180 places. Some of it is about the accessibility and accommodations that are provided in the community. Some of it is about, we have a really high poverty rate here for people with disabilities who are trying to live on Social Security or in other kinds of ways. I think we need to do a lot more work like we're doing here about getting the word out about really what equity, diversity, and inclusion might contain. I'm not to pick on anybody particular, but going to briefly tell you about an earlier experience I had that Rhode Island Foundation was sponsoring these great seminars. I don't know if any of you participated in them, but it was about groundwater. There were anti-racism and how when you look in the water, all of these other kinds of systems of oppression are in the water. And I, using the chat, sent a note into the people asking them if they could turn on the open captioning. I'm starting to develop hearing problems. Obviously, Flavia, when people wear masks and cover their mouths, that makes life even more difficult for us. I don't know if all of us spent too much time, you know, hanging in rock and roll clubs in front of gigantic speakers that it affected our hearings, but you know, it's all getting worse for us. And so I asked for the closed captioning, open captioning to be turned on. And Rhode Island Foundation said it wasn't their problem, that it was the organization who was sponsoring the event, that they just hired them and they were supposed to take care of bringing everything in. And then the organization that was sponsoring the event said it wasn't their problem, it was Rhode Island Foundation's problem because they're supposed to know who their community is and what the needs of their community are. So this is kind of some of what's happening out there as we try and reset. The ball again keeps getting passed around in between whose responsibility is it? And obviously I think a bunch of it's my responsibility, but I also think it's all of, you know, the entire community's responsibility. And so I really appreciate Flavia, what everything is going on down at RIDE about the multimodal and multicultural and everything that's going on down at Tomaquag about, you know, reinforcing different ways of coming across online. And I'm hoping that, yeah, that things about disability and creating access can become more valued at the beginning of some of these projects and not as an afterthought. Like, frankly, I had hoped today would have captioning because that would have made life easier. But again, as we go forward, yeah, equity should not be the end for any one of us, and all of us, yeah, need to move Rhode Island up from being 176 a little higher into the format of places that are okay to live. Thank you. And thank you to RISCA and Humanities for bringing us all together. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jeannine. Thank you. Again, everybody, please
Oh,
take
by
a
the
look
way,
at,
how you applaud if
yes.
you're, yes.
Again, I encourage everybody to take a look in the chat. There's been some very nice insights and links. And I will, as we are all busy people in our boxes, acknowledge that it is now 11:30, which is the end of the program. If anyone is willing to stay on for Q&A or discussion, please do. And that includes our speakers. And I had a few concluding notes. Thank you all. Thank you to our panel, Lydia, Flavia, Silvermoon, and Jeannine. There have been some really interesting themes and strands here, including the importance of children as adapters, learners, and technological adepts. There's also been the thread of intersectionality and aspects of multiculturalness, multilingual experience, multimodality, and art as humanity, connection, and expression, and art as a tool for equity, and the translation of tradition into technology. For those of you who are not staying on, I encourage you to reach out to all of these amazing speakers and to support them and their organizations. And I thank you. And as you see in the chat, we are recording this, so it will be available elsewhere in time. And I think hopefully with captions, hooray. Hit me up, RISCA friends, I can help you with that. And I think the first thing that I would like to do for Q&A is ask the speakers, because you are all rock stars with amazing insights. If you have any questions for each other, or insights or notes that you would like everybody to know and think about.
I just want to applaud what everybody's doing. This has been really a struggle and to deal with everything that happened to us in March. And I'm really amazed at how everybody has been able to identify new ways of doing our programs and new ways of engaging us out in the community. And I hope that the work that we're all doing here and beyond here can really help to reinforce each other. I really appreciate what everybody's up to.
Thank you, Jeannine. Any other thoughts or questions from our speakers?
There's one in the chat.
Thank you very much. Silvermoon, had a question for you, Jeannine. Are there resources to get assistance in evaluating accessibility?
Sure there are, and and you and I and Randy or Todd or whatever can get together at some point at a separate Zoomy conversation and to do some of those kinds of things. I'm really involved at the moment with some places like the Steel Yard, who's doing a lot of work on access, and the state has put out a lot of grants and funding and stuff to improve some of that. So yes, definitely we can talk about that.
Excellent, thank you. Just pointing to the chat, PRIAA's website is in the chat now. Thank you. And I had one question and then I'm going to open it up. Feel free to start putting questions in the chat if you would like, or raising your hand if you have a question, and I'll answer them as I see them. My question is, Jeannine, as you said, I hope we don't go back to normal after this. I think we all feel that sentiment, especially talking about equity and as people from marginalized groups. In terms of for the whole panel, in terms of your work and the ways that you've adapted following the pandemic, what do you hope won't go back to normal? What have you learned about your own work that you are going to take with you in the theoretical end of all of this?
Tough question. Yeah. That more conversations happen, that more information and intersectional work can be done, that a few tips can be more widely shared about how easy it is to put captions on your YouTube videos. One other tip I forgot that I have for you is, I don't know if you can read this, but hashtags, because everybody's using hashtags. People who have vision impairments often use screen readers on their computers. And if you use hashtags, I don't know if you can see this. Let's see. So this says Black Deaf Talent. And if this was written all with small letters, as hashtags often are, the screen reader would not know how to pronounce this. So if you have more than one word in a hashtag, please capitalize the beginning of each word so that then we will be able to know what you're talking about when the screen readers go. So I think little tips like that are evolving and emerging are actually kind of easy, but actually can be incorporated to move things forward.
That's great, thank you. Our other speakers?
I can go. I think one of the things that we've learned from this process is better ways of using the resources available to us. We hadn't done a lot with YouTube and things of that nature until this happened. And it has allowed us to really expand our reach. We're not limited to the state of Rhode Island. You're not limited to local. You're not limited to any restrictions on place and time when you're doing it through the virtual world. So it's allowing us to connect with people in other states and even in other countries, and to be able to provide programming anywhere, so we can really get out there even more. So that, I think, is something that we definitely want to continue with thereafter, and make the resources look for resources to support that, because I think we also learned that this is not less expensive, and it's not, and there's new things you need in order to do it, and to do it well. New equipment, new technology that you need to learn and be able to pay for. So being able to build in, a budget for that kind of stuff too now, that's all new.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you just said, Silvermoon, about time is huge, because to not have to have everybody show up at 7 p.m. at the same, if that's not working for me, to be able to maybe not do it in the live stream, but to catch it later at a more convenient time has really been a huge bonus for my community. That's been great.
I would like to add that in the world of education, what we have always known is how important parents are as partners to learning. And in this pandemic with the virtual learning, we have been truly messaging to the parents with intentionality, something that we haven't really done in the past. And parents at the moment in a virtual environment are the true and only partners and the connection between schools and families. I have a 5-year-old who is doing kindergarten virtual, and if it wasn't for my husband taking the time to follow him and make sure that he had all his meeting and his Zoom calls ready, my son wouldn't have any kind of interaction. And again, I talk from the position of a privileged person. And so I realized if it wasn't for my husband being able to do that, my son wouldn't have had that opportunity. And so this makes me think, if as a privileged person, we still feel that that need and that necessity, then how much more other students are in need, and we are not considering or bringing up to the attention of the general public. So I hope that after the pandemic, that connection and those bridges that are building between and among families and schools will remain there and will not be lost.
Thank you.
Flavia, I also just want to highlight, you said, I think it was you that said earlier about making a comment about not relying on just reading and writing in some of what you were talking about with your educational stuff and presenting sort of, it was like a storyboard of a story rather than the words of a story. And we've worked with the Department of Ed in K through 12 schools for almost all of our 30 years. And ideas like that and how arts can inform the larger learning process, I think are just tremendous. And it's so great to hear you talk about that and talk about that you're moving into doing more of that kind of work. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. And I hope more collaboration among state agencies will continue also, because we need to leverage the little that we have and make sure that we are reaching every student and in every single home. And also our messages should be accessible for all.
Thank you, Flavia. I think our audience is diminishing here, but I'll put in one plug for audience questions if anyone has any burning questions, and then I think we can say goodbye and thank you again to our panelists.
Great job on the moderating, Janaya. Great job on the moderating. Does the library have resources? Because you mentioned earlier about, or is it you personally that knows all about, captioning and other kinds of things? What does the library have for us all?
The library does have resources, and we're sort of working on marshaling or gathering the resources that we have and offering them more to the public, both virtual and in person. Right now we're regrouping. And yes, as events coordinator, I did have to learn very fast. And it was very important to me from the start to try to be adaptable. And actually, here come my closing remarks. What I think has been most important to me, and what I'm also getting from everything that you all said in the panel, is that adapting has meant in some ways taking institutional tools and repurposing them. YouTube, Google Slides, janky closed captioning, automated closed captioning, just video streaming, TikTok, like it's all there, and it's all not meant for this purpose, but it allows us in a sort of active decolonization to use these institutional tools to communicate with each other and build communities that can really start to undo some of the work that these institutions are doing, and to connect us better and make us stronger and help us understand each other better. And that's the thing that I hope that we can all take from the pandemic in general. And again, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you to RISCA. Thank you to everyone on the panel. Thank you to the audience who stayed. Yes, thank you very much. I encourage everyone to, again, reach out to these amazing people and support them and their organizations, and to think of equity first as the foundation to adaptability. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of the day.